The rain pattered against the ancient stones, washing away the grime of centuries. Zachary Linden stood before the imposing tower that jutted from the castle's eastern wing like a defiant finger pointed toward heaven. 6 months at Castle Ravenswood as Master of Arms, yet the tower remained a mystery, its doors barred to all but Lord Hartwick himself. "They say it holds a treasure beyond imagining," whispered Elias, a stable boy barely into his 13th year, who had taken to following Zachary about the grounds like a shadow. "They say many things," Zachary replied, adjusting his sword belt as he turned away from the tower. "Most of which are nonsense meant to frighten children into obedience." Yet even as he dismissed the rumors, he could not help but glance back at the narrow windows cut into the tower's weathered stone. For a moment, he thought he saw movement, a flicker of candlelight, perhaps, or merely his imagination dancing with shadows. Lord Hartwick had brought him to Ravenswood after the siege at Thornfield, where Zachary had saved the nobleman's life. A debt repaid with a position of honor, but Zachary knew better than to mistake employment for trust. The castle held its secrets close, and he was still an outsider. The spring feast was but a fortnight away, and the castle bustled with preparations. Zachary's duties had doubled, training the guard, securing the perimeter, and preparing for the influx of noble guests. Yet his thoughts returned to the tower, drawn like a moth to flame. Theresa Prescott adjusted her plain woolen dress, its deep blue a subtle reminder of the status she had forsaken when she accepted the position as Lady Hartwick's handmaiden. The daughter of a minor lord, she had chosen service over an arranged marriage to a man thrice her age. 5 years had passed since that decision, and she had never regretted it, until now. "You will accompany me to the tower this evening," Lady Hartwick had instructed, her voice as cold as the stone wall surrounding them. "Speak of this to no one." Theresa knew better than to question her mistress. Lady Hartwick had been kind to her, in her way, but there was an edge to her kindness that cut when tested. As she made her way through the great hall, she noticed the new Master of Arms standing by the hearth, deep in conversation with Sir Edmund, the castle steward. Zachary Linden had arrived during the harshest days of winter, when snow piled against the castle walls and wolves howled in the distant forest. He was tall and broad-shouldered, with eyes the color of storm clouds and a scar that traced his jawline like a river on a map. Their eyes met briefly across the hall. Theresa nodded politely before continuing on her way, yet she felt his gaze follow her until she disappeared around the corner. The tower awaited, and with it, secrets she was not certain she wished to uncover. "The eastern tower is off-limits," Sir Edmund reminded Zachary as they discussed security arrangements for the spring feast. "By decree of Lord Hartwick himself." "I understand," Zachary replied, though curiosity gnawed at him. "But surely as Master of Arms, I should know what I am protecting." Sir Edmund's expression soured. "Some questions are better left unasked, Master Linden. Lord Hartwick values loyalty above all else." "And he has mine," Zachary assured him. "But loyalty built on blind obedience stands on shaky ground." The steward leaned closer, his voice dropping to a whisper. "The last man who pressed too hard about the tower was found floating in the moat. An accident, they said." Zachary's hand instinctively moved to the hilt of his sword. "Are you threatening me, Sir Edmund?" "Warning you," the steward corrected, his eyes darting nervously to the servants cleaning nearby. "As one who would prefer not to see history repeat itself." That evening, as Zachary patrolled the inner bailey, he noticed a slender figure gliding toward the eastern tower. The hood of her cloak had slipped back just enough to reveal a glimpse of dark hair. Theresa Prescott, Lady Hartwick's handmaiden. She carried a small basket covered with cloth and moved with the cautious step of one who wished to remain unseen. Zachary hesitated, torn between duty and curiosity. Sir Edmund's warning echoed in his mind, yet he found himself following at a distance, staying within the shadows cast by the moonlight. Theresa stopped before the tower door, producing a key from within her cloak. The lock turned with a groan of metal, and she slipped inside, pulling the door closed behind her. For several moments, Zachary stood frozen, weighing his options. Then, decision made, he approached the tower. The stone steps spiraled upward, worn smooth by the passage of feet over centuries. Theresa climbed carefully, one hand holding her basket, the other trailing along the wall for balance. The only light came from narrow arrow slits that allowed slivers of moonlight to penetrate the darkness. At the top of the stairs, she paused to catch her breath before knocking softly on the wooden door. "Enter," came a voice from within, not Lady Hartwick's, but one Theresa had never heard before. She pushed open the door to reveal a circular chamber that occupied the entire top floor of the tower. Unlike the stark military utility suggested by the tower's exterior, the room within was appointed with surprising comfort. Tapestries lined the walls, their colors muted by time but still beautiful. A fire crackled in a small hearth, and bookshelves lined with leather-bound volumes crowded against one wall. In the center of the room sat a woman, perhaps 30 years of age, with hair the color of copper and eyes that seemed to shift between green and gold in the firelight. She wore a simple gown of undyed linen, but her posture spoke of nobility. "You must be Theresa," the woman said, rising from her chair. "Margaret has told me much about you." Theresa cursed, confusion evident in her expression. "I apologize, my lady, but Lady Hartwick did not tell me who I would be meeting." The woman smiled, though there was a sadness to it that made Theresa's heart ache. "No, I imagine she wouldn't have. My sister has always been protective of me, sometimes to a fault. I am Eleanor Hartwick, though that name has not been spoken aloud in this castle for nearly a decade." Theresa's eyes widened. Everyone knew the tale of Eleanor Hartwick, the Lord's younger sister who had died of a wasting illness years before. A chapel had been built in her memory, and prayers were still said for her soul during every feast. "But you died," Theresa whispered, the basket nearly slipping from her grasp. "There was a funeral procession. I was but a child, but I remember it passing through the village." "A convenient fiction," Eleanor replied, gesturing for Theresa to sit. "One crafted to protect both my family's honor and my life." The lock was old but well maintained. Zachary studied it carefully, considering his options. Breaking in would be a betrayal of trust, yet the mystery of the tower and Theresa's secret visit compelled him forward. Before he could decide, however, the door swung open, and he found himself face to face with Theresa Prescott. She gasped, nearly dropping the now empty basket she carried. "Master Linden." "What are you?" She glanced over her shoulder, then stepped outside, pulling the door shut behind her. "You shouldn't be here." "Neither should you, it seems," he replied quietly. "The Eastern Tower is forbidden to all but Lord Hartwick." Color rose in Theresa's cheeks, visible even in the dim light. "I act on Lady Hartwick's instructions." "To do what, exactly?" She hesitated, clearly torn between loyalty to her mistress and the need to prevent Zachary from investigating further. "To deliver food and necessities." "Nothing more." "To whom?" Zachary pressed, stepping closer. "Who dwells in this tower that requires such secrecy?" "Please," Theresa said, her voice dropping to a whisper. "Ask no more questions. For your own safety, if not for mine." There was genuine fear in her eyes, enough to give Zachary pause. "Are you in danger, Lady Prescott?" A small, bitter laugh escaped her lips. "I am no lady, Master Linden. Just a handmaiden who knows her place, and the cost of forgetting it." Before he could respond, the sound of approaching footsteps echoed from the courtyard below. Theresa's eyes widened in alarm. "You must go. Now." "Meet me tomorrow," Zachary said impulsively. "In the herb garden after vespers." "Please." She hesitated, then nodded once before slipping past him and hurrying down the stairs. Zachary retreated into the shadows just as two guards rounded the corner, their torches casting long, dancing shadows against the stone walls. The herb garden lay within the castle walls but far from the main buildings, a quiet haven of medicinal plants and culinary herbs tended by Brother Thomas, the castle's resident healer. As the bells of the chapel tolled the end of evening prayers, Zachary made his way through the neat rows of plantings, his mind still wrestling with the mystery of the tower. He had spent the day making discreet inquiries about Eleanor Hartwick, piecing together fragments of a story that had faded into legend. The Lord's sister, beautiful and learned, had fallen ill shortly after her 20th year. Some whispered of a broken heart, others of a curse. What was clear was that she had died, or so everyone believed, and Lord Hartwick had forbidden her name to be mentioned in his presence ever since. Theresa arrived just as twilight deepened into true darkness, moving cautiously between the raised beds of herbs whose pungent scents filled the cool evening air. "I was not certain you would come," Zachary said, stepping forward to meet her. "Nor was I," she admitted. "This is dangerous, Master Linden." "Zachary, please." She nodded, though she did not offer him the same familiarity in return. "What I tell you must remain between us. Lives depend upon it." "You have my word," he promised. Theresa took a deep breath, the words tumbling out as though she had held them back too long. "Eleanor Hartwick lives. She has been confined to that tower for nearly 10 years, hidden away from the world that believes her dead." Though he had begun to suspect as much, hearing it confirmed sent a chill down Zachary's spine. "Why? Is she ill?" "Not in body," Theresa replied. "She is as healthy as you or I. Her confinement serves another purpose entirely." "Which is?" Theresa glanced around nervously before continuing. "She fell in love with a man her brother deemed unsuitable, a scholar from the university, with no title or lands to his name. When Lord Hartwick forbade the match, they planned to elope. They were caught the night they attempted to flee." "And the scholar?" Zachary asked, though he suspected he already knew the answer. "Executed for attempting to kidnap a noble woman," Theresa said, bitterness edging her voice. "Eleanor was declared ill to explain her absence while Lord Hartwick decided her fate. When her condition worsened, her grief mistaken for disease, it provided the perfect opportunity to pronounce her dead while keeping her safely hidden away." "But why maintain the charade for so many years?" "Because Eleanor was with child when she was caught," Theresa whispered. "A child who now lives in the village, raised by a couple who believe him to be an orphan of the plague. Lord Hartwick pays them handsomely for their care and their silence." Zachary ran a hand through his hair, struggling to absorb the enormity of what he was hearing. "Does she know?" "About her child?" "Yes," Theresa nodded. "Lady Hartwick ensures she receives reports of his welfare. It is both her greatest comfort and her deepest sorrow. And Lady Hartwick allows this imprisonment to continue. She believes she is protecting her sister," Theresa explained. "Lord Hartwick has powerful enemies who would use any scandal to destroy him. If word spread that Eleanor lived and had borne a child out of wedlock, the family would be ruined," Zachary finished. "But surely after so many years, the risk has diminished." Theresa shook her head. "Old grievances run deep among the nobility. And there is more to this tale than I have shared." Before she could continue, a twig snapped nearby. Both froze, eyes scanning the darkened garden. "Who's there?" Zachary called, hand moving to his sword. Silence answered him, but the damage was done. Theresa stepped back, fear evident in her expression. "I must go. We've already said too much." "Wait," Zachary caught her arm gently. "What of Eleanor's child? How old would he be now?" 9 years, Theresa replied. "He has his mother's copper hair and his father's quick mind. Brother Thomas tutors him, though the boy does not know why a monk takes such interest in his education." With that, she slipped away into the darkness, leaving Zachary alone with questions multiplying in his mind like ripples in a pond. For 3 days, Zachary saw nothing of Theresa. His duties kept him busy. A dispute between 2 guards had escalated into a brawl that required his intervention, and preparations for the spring feast consumed what little time remained. Yet his thoughts continually returned to the tower and its captive. On the 4th day, as he supervised archery practice in the outer bailey, he noticed a commotion at the main gate. A small party of riders had arrived, their dust-covered cloaks bearing the insignia of the royal court. At their head rode a man of middle years, his bearing proud despite the evident fatigue of long travel. Sir Edmund hurried to greet the newcomers, surprise and concern warring on his features. Zachary moved closer, close enough to hear the steward's greeting. "Lord Talbot, we did not expect you until the feast. Lord Hartwick is hunting in the North Woods today. "My business will not wait," Lord Talbot replied, dismounting with the fluid grace of one accustomed to life in the saddle. "I bring news from court that concerns him greatly." Zachary watched as the visitors were escorted into the great hall, noting the nervous glances exchanged among the castle servants. Lord Talbot was known to him by reputation, a powerful nobleman with close ties to the king, and, if rumours were to be believed, no friend to Lord Hartwick. That evening, the castle hummed with whispers. Lord Hartwick had returned early from his hunt, his mood black as thunderclouds. Lord Talbot and his men had been given chambers in the west wing, as far from the mysterious eastern tower as possible. As Zachary made his nightly rounds, checking that all was secure before retiring, he encountered Theresa hurrying across the inner courtyard, her expression tense. "What troubles you?" he asked, falling into step beside her. "Lord Talbot's arrival," she replied, voice hushed. He was betrothed to Eleanor before she met her scholar. The broken engagement caused a rift between the families that has never healed. "And now he returns, unannounced and ahead of schedule," Zachary mused. "That cannot be coincidence." "Lady Hartwick fears he has learned the truth," Theresa confessed. "She has doubled the guard at the tower and forbidden me from visiting Eleanor until Lord Talbot departs." A cold feeling settled in Zachary's stomach. If he knows Eleanor lives, what will he do? "I cannot say for certain," Theresa replied. "But he is a proud man, and the humiliation of being cast aside has festered for a decade. Lady Hartwick fears he seeks revenge. Or perhaps redemption," Zachary suggested. 10 years is a long time to nurse a grudge. Theresa's skeptical glance spoke volumes about her opinion on the capacity of noblemen to forgive perceived slights. "Regardless, Eleanor is terrified. She has not left that tower in years, yet she knows she is not safe there if Lord Talbot truly means her harm." "Then she must leave," Zachary said, the words tumbling out before he could consider their weight. "Before the feast, when the castle will be filled with strangers and confusion." "Leave? How? Where would she go?" Theresa demanded. "She has no money, no allies outside these walls." "She has us," Zachary replied simply. "And I have friends who would shelter her until a more permanent solution can be arranged." Theresa stared at him, hope and fear battling in her expression. "You would risk everything, your position, perhaps your life, for a woman you've never met." "I would risk it to right a wrong," he corrected. "No one deserves to live as a prisoner for the crime of loving unwisely." After a long moment, Theresa nodded. "I will speak with Eleanor. But we must be careful. Lord Hartwick's men are loyal, and there are eyes everywhere." 3 nights hence, Zachary suggested. "During the welcoming feast for the early arrivals. The guards will be distracted, and I can arrange to be on duty at the eastern gate." As they parted ways, Zachary felt the weight of his decision settle upon his shoulders. He had sworn an oath to serve Lord Hartwick faithfully, yet here he was, plotting to undermine the very man who had given him a position of honor. But another oath, older and more fundamental, pulled at his conscience, the oath he had made to himself after Thornfield, to never again stand by while injustice was served in the name of duty. The 3 days passed with agonizing slowness. Zachary went about his duties with outward calm, though his mind raced with preparations and contingencies. He had sent a trusted messenger to his former comrade in arms, Martin Fletcher, who now ran a prosperous in 2 days' ride to the south. Martin would shelter Eleanor without question, asking only that she help with the inn's accounts in exchange for her keep. Theresa, meanwhile, had managed to visit Eleanor once, briefly, to outline their plan. The tower's inhabitant had wept at the prospect of freedom but insisted on one condition: she must see her son before she left. "Impossible," Zachary had argued when Theresa relayed this request. "The boy is in the village. To bring him to the castle now would raise too many questions." "Then we must find another way," Theresa insisted. "She will not leave without seeing him. For 10 years, she has lived for the reports of his growth, his health, his happiness. Would you deny a mother one glimpse of her child before she flees into an uncertain future?" Zachary sighed, knowing she was right. "The village, then. We will pass through it on our way south." A brief stop, no more. The night of the welcoming feast arrived with a flourish of activity. The great hall had been transformed, its usual austerity softened by garlands of spring flowers and the warm glow of hundreds of candles. Musicians played in the gallery above, their melodies almost, but not quite, masking the undercurrent of tension that ran through the gathering. Lord Hartwick sat at the high table, his smile fixed and cold as he conversed with Lord Talbot, who had been given the place of honour at his right hand. Lady Hartwick, pale beneath her rouge, picked at her food and cast frequent glances toward the door. Zachary, positioned near the entrance in his official capacity, noticed every detail, the way Lord Talbot leaned close to whisper something that made Lord Hartwick's knuckles whiten around his goblet, the subtle nod from Lady Hartwick that sent Theresa slipping away from the festivities, the increased number of guards posted throughout the castle, far more than the occasion warranted. As the feasting gave way to dancing, Zachary made his excuses to Sir Edmund and began his patrol of the castle perimeter. Instead of completing his usual circuit, however, he made his way to the stables, where 2 horses waited, saddled and provisioned for a journey. The stable boy, Elias, had been given a silver coin to ensure his silence, and another to ensure he would be elsewhere when the horses disappeared. Zachary led them quietly to a small postern gate in the eastern wall, one rarely used and lightly guarded. The single guard stationed there had been carefully selected, an older man who owed Zachary a debt for intervening when his son faced punishment for a minor infraction. An hour, Zachary told the guard as he pressed a purse of coins into the man's weathered hand. Then raise the alarm. The guard nodded, pocketing the money without a word. Some questions were better left unasked. Tethering the horses in the shadow of the wall, Zachary doubled back toward the eastern tower. The plan was simple. Theresa would help Eleanor down from the tower and guide her to the meeting point while the feast was at its height. From there, Zachary would escort them both through the postern gate and onto the village, where Eleanor would have her brief reunion with her son before they continued south to Martin's Inn. Simple, yet so much could go wrong. As he approached the tower, Zachary's instincts prickled. It was too quiet. The additional guards Lady Hartwick had posted were nowhere to be seen. He quickened his pace, hand moving to the hilt of his sword. The tower door stood ajar, a slash of darkness against the stone wall. Drawing his weapon, he pushed the door wider and stepped inside. The spiral staircase loomed before him, dark and silent. He began to climb, each step careful and measured to minimize noise. As he neared the top, he heard voices, one male, one female, both tight with emotion. Waited 10 years for this moment, the male voice was saying, its cultured tones edged with cold fury. 10 years believing you dead, only to discover the elaborate deception perpetrated by your brother. My brother sought to protect me, came the reply, a woman's voice, clear and steady despite the obvious fear beneath her words. And my child. Your bastard, you mean, Lord Talbot spat. The living proof of your betrayal. Zachary reached the top of the stairs and peered carefully around the edge of the doorway. Eleanor Hartwick stood with her back to a wall of bookshelves, copper hair glinting in the firelight, chin lifted in defiance despite her evident fear. Facing her was Lord Talbot, his posture rigid with rage. Off to one side, Theresa lay crumpled on the floor, a trickle of blood visible at her temple. What I did was wrong, Eleanor acknowledged, her gaze unwavering. I should have faced you directly, broken our betrothal honestly instead of allowing my heart to lead me into deception. For that, I am truly sorry, Robert. But I will not apologize for loving him, nor for my son. Your apologies mean nothing, Lord Talbot replied. As your life will mean nothing once I reveal to the world that the noble house of Hartwick has been built on lies. Your brother's position, his influence at court, all will crumble when this sordid tale becomes known. Is revenge worth the price you will pay? Eleanor asked quietly. The king values my brother's counsel. He will not thank you for destroying a trusted advisor over a decade-old slight. Lord Talbot laughed, the sound devoid of humor. The king values results, and I have delivered them consistently for years while your brother has faltered. This scandal is merely the final stone that will tip the scales in my favor. Zachary had heard enough. He stepped into the room, sword drawn. Step away from the lady, Lord Talbot. The nobleman turned, surprise quickly giving way to contempt as he took in Zachary's uniform. "The master of arms, I presume? Come to rescue the damsel? How predictably gallant." "I've come to prevent a mistake," Zachary corrected. "One that would cost you far more than you stand to gain." Bold words from a common soldier, Talbot sneered, drawing his own sword, a finely crafted weapon that gleamed wickedly in the firelight. "But you are outmatched, boy." "Perhaps," Zachary conceded, shifting his stance to prepare for combat. "Yet here I stand." Before either man could strike, however, a new voice cut through the tension. "Lower your weapons. Both of you." Lady Hartwick stood in the doorway, her elegant gown at odds with the small crossbow she held steadily in her hands. Behind her, 2 guards waited, swords drawn. "Margaret," Lord Talbot acknowledged with a mocking bow. "How good of you to join us. I was just becoming acquainted with your sister, the one you claimed was dead and buried." "The deception was my husband's doing, not mine," Lady Hartwick replied coldly. "A fact I have come to regret deeply over the years." "Yet you perpetuated the lie," Talbot pointed out. "To protect my sister, yes," she agreed. "And to protect you as well, old friend." This seemed to catch Talbot off guard. "Protect me? With lies?" "The truth would have destroyed 3 families, not just one," Lady Hartwick explained, her crossbow never wavering. "Eleanor's indiscretion, my husband's cruelty in separating her from her child, and your humiliation at being cast aside, all exposed for the court to feast upon like carrion crows. I chose a different path." "A path of imprisonment," Eleanor interjected quietly, moving to check on Theresa, who was beginning to stir. "A gilded cage is still a cage, sister." Lady Hartwick's expression softened fractionally. "I did what I thought best at the time. Perhaps I was wrong." During this exchange, Zachary had not lowered his sword, nor had Talbot. The 2 men circled each other warily, waiting for an opening or a command. "What happens now?" Talbot demanded. "Will you kill me to maintain your secret? That would cause more questions than it answers." "No one needs to die tonight," Lady Hartwick replied. "There is another way forward, if you are wise enough to take it." "I'm listening," Talbot said, though his sword remained at the ready. "Eleanor leaves tonight, as was already planned," Lady Hartwick explained. "She will live quietly elsewhere, far from court and its intrigues. In return for your silence on this matter, my husband will support your petition to the king regarding the western territories you have long coveted." Talbot's eyes narrowed calculatingly. "The western territories would make me the wealthiest lord in 3 counties. "Indeed," Lady Hartwick agreed. "Far more valuable than a decade-old vendetta, I should think." "And if I refuse?" "Then we all lose," she said simply. "The scandal will destroy my husband, yes, but it will touch you as well." The jilted suitor, nursing his wounded pride for 10 years, only to emerge seeking vengeance like a character from a minstrel's tale? The court would feast on your humiliation for seasons to come. A tense silence fell as Lord Talbot considered his options. Finally, slowly, he lowered his sword. "The Western Territories," he repeated. "And your husband's full support before the king." "You have my word," Lady Hartwick promised. "Then we have an accord," Talbot decided, sheathing his weapon with a fluid motion. "Though I suggest you hurry. Your husband was becoming suspicious of my frequent questions about the Eastern Tower. He may already be on his way here." Zachary lowered his sword as well, moving immediately to help Theresa to her feet. She swayed slightly but remained standing, one hand pressed to the wound on her temple. "He struck her when she tried to warn Eleanor," Lady Hartwick explained, her voice hardening as she glared at Lord Talbot. "An action unbecoming of your station, Robert." "My apologies," he offered with minimal sincerity. The heat of the moment. "We must go," Zachary urged, suddenly aware of how much time had passed. "The guard at the eastern postern will only wait so long before raising the alarm." Lady Hartwick nodded, handing the crossbow to one of her guards. "Go, all of you. I will deal with my husband." Eleanor embraced her sister fiercely. Thank you, Margaret. For everything, despite everything. Live well, Lady Hartwick whispered, returning the embrace. That is all the thanks I require. The village lay quiet under a blanket of stars, most of its inhabitants long since retired to their beds. Only the soft glow of candlelight from a few windows broke the darkness as Zachary, Eleanor, and Theresa made their way along the main street. There, Theresa whispered, pointing to a modest cottage near the village green. That is where he lives. Eleanor's steps faltered. After all this time, what if he fears me? What if he hates me for abandoning him? He does not know you abandoned him, Zachary reminded her gently. To him, you are a stranger. But this may be your only chance to see him. We cannot linger here long. Gathering her courage, Eleanor approached the cottage. Rather than knocking, however, she moved to a small window on the side, where the shutters had been left partially open to admit the cool night air. Through the gap, they could see a small room lit by a single candle. A boy sat at a rough wooden table, his copper hair gleaming in the candlelight as he bent over a book, lips moving silently as he read. His face, in profile, echoed Eleanor's in its fine bones and determined chin. Thomas, she breathed, one hand pressed against her mouth to stifle a sob of recognition. The boy looked up suddenly, as though he had heard something. His eyes, green with flecks of gold, just like his mother's, scanned the room before turning toward the window. For one heart-stopping moment, mother and son locked eyes across the divide of wood and glass and years of separation. The boy tilted his head curiously, perhaps wondering why a strange woman would be peering into his home in the middle of the night. Eleanor raised her hand in a small gesture, not quite a wave, more an acknowledgement. After a moment's hesitation, the boy returned the gesture, a puzzled smile flickering across his features before he returned to his book. He has his father's love of learning, Eleanor whispered, tears streaming freely down her face now. Julian would be so proud. We must go, Zachary urged, keeping watch for any signs of pursuit from the castle. Lord Hartwick will soon discover your absence, if he hasn't already. With a last, lingering look at her son, Eleanor turned away. Yes. I am ready now. As they mounted their horses at the edge of the village, Theresa reached over to squeeze Eleanor's hand. You will see him again someday, I promise you. When he is older, when it is safe. Perhaps, Eleanor replied, her voice steadier now. But even if I do not, I have this moment. For 10 years, I have existed on scraps of information, imagining his face, his voice, his life. Now I have seen him with my own eyes. That is more than I ever dared hope for. They rode south under the cover of darkness, 3 figures bound together by secrets and sacrifice, leaving behind the tower that had been both prison and sanctuary. Ahead lay uncertainty, but also possibility, the chance to build a life beyond the castle walls. Zachary glanced back once at the dark silhouette of Ravenswood Castle against the night sky, the eastern tower jutting upward like an accusatory finger. He thought of the oath he had broken and the new one he had, in effect, sworn by his actions this night. No regret shadowed his mind as he turned his gaze forward again, toward whatever lay ahead on the road south. Some mysteries, once revealed, demanded action rather than contemplation. And some walls, once breached, could never be rebuilt.